there are snubs in sports, and I've said this before, that it is oftentimes not cut and dry whether this guy's a starter and this guy's not. Sometimes it's 51%, 49%. It's really, really close. So when guys get snubbed, they can view it as getting snubbed, or they can view it as I just have to get better. One guy that came to mind when I heard of Jaylen Brown getting snubbed from the Olympic team was Alvin Kamara. Still the most impressive junior college player that I've ever covered after junior college. Had a smile on his face, didn't care that he wasn't getting snubbed for Jalen Hurd because Jalen Hurd had gotten paid. And Alvin Kamara went out there and played his best, made himself into an NFL prospect. He got snubbed completely, but I think it was best for him because he had more tread on his tires and he always had a smile on his face. What Vol has gotten the worst snub, and I have a feeling that Heisman Trophy will come into this? Go ahead and give me some thoughts there if we can. I want to hear from you on the message board, but Caleb, you got a darn good one as well, and it actually deals with the Olympic team.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious snub was Candace Parker, 2016. The idea that Gina Auriemma left her off the Olympic team. I mean, she was not as marketable as Caitlin Clark is now, but she was at the time the most marketable WNBA player. Was that fair to say? Like, she was the biggest ratings draw for the WNBA. She was the best player in the WNBA.
And I don't want this to sound sexist, but she is strikingly gorgeous.
Strikingly good looking.
Which helps. I mean, Tony Vitello is a good looking man. I mean, so when you're doing, I don't know why I can't. What was the official reason that Auriemma ever gave for not having?
He said she didn't do well in the tryouts, but like she was the best player in all the tryouts. This was all because she didn't commit to play for Auriemma, and he was still bitter about that. And he chooses the year Pat Summitt died to rub salt in that wound. Which, I mean, that just speaks to how much of a sleazeball he is. That's the biggest snub.
Now, go ahead.
I was going to give you another snub that I think is kind of intriguing, and I wanted to know your thoughts on it. But I think Chris Lofton and Casey Clausen not getting drafted in the NFL and NBA were snubs.
I'll give you Casey 100%. I thought Chris height was an issue.
Look at the NBA today.
Well, that's true. I'm not sure it should have been an issue, but I think it was then. Crystal says Hendon Hooker. Smoky Mountain Red says Hooker not getting an invite to New York City at a minimum was BS. So let's rank these. Worst Heisman snubs. Majors, Peyton, or Hendon just not getting invited. If I had to rank them, I would say Peyton, Majors, and then Hendon not getting invited would be my third most egregious of the trio.
That's my ranking. That's exactly my ranking too. Actually, no, I'm gonna have Hendon not getting invited above Majors, and here's why. Paul Hornung winning the Heisman was the scandal. Majors did finish second. Between the two, Majors deserved it over Paul Hornung. But honestly, Dave, Jim Brown should have won that Heisman, even over both of them. And that was the real snub of that year. Majors finishing second to Paul Hornung was a snub. That was stupid. He was better than Hornung. But Jim Brown finishing behind both of them was absolutely ridiculous. He should have won that Heisman.
Would you agree that lock, stock, and barrel Peyton should have won? I don't know.
Easily. Peyton easily should have won it over Charles Woodson. And the only reason he didn't was because both of their last regular season games, a lot of people don't know this, Peyton and Tennessee struggled against Vanderbilt. And you remember that, Dave. They always struggled against those Woody Woodenhofer Vanderbilt teams. Always. Largely because, as you pointed out, Fulmer wasn't even preparing for Vanderbilt during that time.
What was the point?
And in that same week, Michigan beat Ohio State, and Charles Woodson had his best game in the biggest moment. And Heisman voters turned in their ballots before the SEC championship game because many people believed that the SEC championship game at that time should be factored into the Heisman because not every conference played a championship game. So many people on principle said, we're not going to turn in our ballots, or we're not going to base the SEC title game for our ballots. Now, had they done that, had everybody waited till after the SEC title game, I think Peyton Manning would have won the Heisman. Because what he did against Auburn that's the best SEC title game performance in the history of the SEC title.
Well, and I've said this before. I mean, I think it's Peyton because he was clearly the best player that year. And I know people that worked at ESPN, Jimmy Himes and I have talked to some of the same people, have discussed it before. They wanted to get good ratings for the Heisman ceremony, which sounds stupid nowadays because you just read the paper the next day and find out who won. Do you sit through the whole stupid Heisman ceremony? I mean, who sits through that damn thing? So there were people at ESPN that wanted to get the best ratings possible. So they were pushing Big Ten opponents for regionality and to get more people viewing it. And they ended up going too far. And there were actually some people at ESPN that truly regretted how much they pushed some of the people they pushed, like Ron Dane. I mean, and Charles Woodson, though, to his credit, he was given the platform because ESPN wanted somebody from the Big Ten, and he had his Heisman moment against Ohio State. So I'm not shortchanging him for what he did at all.
Yeah, that was exactly it. It was the Heisman's about moments, and Charles Woodson, while Tennessee was struggling with Vanderbilt the last week of the season, Charles Woodson was having the game of his life against Ohio State, the biggest game of the year for Michigan.
Yeah.
And that changed everything. So
for those that don't remember, that was the one-handed interception, the punt return for a touchdown. He did everything, and everybody was watching.
Yep.
It literally is one of those things that like 15 things had to go wrong for Peyton Manning. If any one of those things go right, then he's your Heisman Trophy winner. I still think it's one of the greatest snubs in sports, to be honest with you. And I'm not speaking of this, as you know, Caleb, from a fan's perspective. I'm speaking of just I think he got all out screwed.
Oh, I agree. He absolutely got screwed. Another big Heisman snub, by the way, I'll throw this one out, is the most underrated Tennessee Heisman snub nobody talks about. No one ever talks about this. You always talk about Majors. You always talk about Manning. No one talks about Heath Schuler because it's not that Heath Schuler wasn't great that year, but Charlie Ward put up insane gaudy numbers, didn't he?
I remember thinking to myself, and you might want to check me on this, that if Heath Schuler had been the same candidate the year before or after Charlie Ward won it, that he would have won it easily.
I agree.
Can you double check the years? And we'll tell you a little something about Newbert Collision Center while Caleb does that, because Heath would have won it 8 years out of 10.
Fifth year, the second and third generations continue Joe Newbert's commitment.
His vision of what this business needed to be, we still try to live up to that.
Joe Newbert Collision Center.
All right, so Charlie Ward won it over Heath Schuler. Who won it the year before?
Gino Toretta with just 19 touchdowns at Miami.
He would have beat Gino, there's no question, with the same year that he had in his second place finish. And then who won it the year after had he come back?
This would have been more difficult. Had he come back, it would have been Rashawn Salem at Colorado. Rashawn Salem did rush for 2,000 yards.
Rashawn Salem. Yeah, that's fine. No, he was a very good football player. And that's back when it didn't have to go to a quarterback, that running backs were very much in play. No question about it.
We have to, I wanted to throw out this Heisman snub because it's actually the most underrated Heisman snub and the most clear-cut Heisman snub that Tennessee had. 1951, Hank Larcella should have won the Heisman that year.
Okay.
Over Dick Keismeyer for Princeton. Hank Larcella had 111 carries for 881 yards, averaged 8 yards a carry. Dick Keismeyer had 150 attempts for 861 yards, 20 fewer yards and 50 more carries or 40 more carries, but he had one more touchdown. That's absolutely ridiculous. And Tennessee was declared national champions that year. There's no reason Hank Larcella shouldn't have won the Heisman that year. And just a couple of lesser snubs from awards perspective.
What was his name again?
Hank Larcella?
No, the other guy.
Dick Keismeyer?
Yes. Isn't that a cream?
That's hot.
Oh my God, Dave.
What's the guy's name again? Did anybody else think that's a weird name? What's the guy's name again?
I don't know how you pronounce the last name. Dick Keismeyer. Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
But
It's
a couple of
ointment,
awards.
I believe. It's an
A
ointment.
couple of award snubs I want to bring up real quick. Travis Stevens should have won the Doak Walker in 2001. That was ridiculous that he didn't win the Doak Walker in 2001.
I agree with that. I hadn't thought about it, but I agree with it.
The worst, Dustin Colquitt not winning the Ray Guy Award in 2003 was one of the most absolutely ridiculous snubs in history. Dustin Colquitt won 2 games for Tennessee that year. Everybody who watches this show knows I don't like punting. I think punting is the most overused play in football. I think it's stupid. It's a literal turnover. Dustin Colquitt beat South
Well,
Carolina and Miami that year.
Yeah, well, I don't have an argument with either one of those. I think that would be fine. I do find it interesting that you think Hank Larcella was the bigger snub. Tennessee, as far as snubs, has there been anybody in the NFL draft that's fallen incredibly far? Just happened. Dalton Connect. He just got snubbed to fall where he is, and now he's playing well in the summer league. So yeah, that was a snub, which was a little bit odd.